A sex ed presentation once offered to children in New Brunswick is being withheld from me by the creeps who developed it. That's right. It was fine to show this presentation to New Brunswick children behind their parents' backs, but they're keeping me and I guess you from seeing it. I'm not putting up with it. What's done in the dark will be seen in the light, but I'm going to need a little bit of help from you.
We haven't found anyone in the system that actually looked at the presentation.
Would that suggest a problem with the vetting process or the group in your mind?
Well, I think all of the above, because if there wasn't clarity going into what was acceptable or considered acceptable and what wasn't, that's a problem. If there wasn't a request to see the entire presentation before you present it to 200 kids in an auditorium, that's a problem. So it seems like maybe there's an opportunity on both sides to say, be clear on what we're asking for and to be very clear on what's being presented.
Do you remember the controversy around the absolutely inappropriate sex ed presentation offered to New Brunswick students between the ages of grade 9 and grade 11? It was offered by a third-party group based out of Quebec, HPV Global Action. And the sex ed resource, heavy on the scare quotes there, was called Thirsty for the Talk. Now, once the Premier of New Brunswick, Blaine Higgs, got wind of this presentation after parents began posting screenshots of it to social media, HPV Global Action was banned from New Brunswick classrooms.
Okay. So what would you say you learned? HPV, HPV, I didn't even know it existed.
Now you do.
Yeah, now I do.
So now you have to find out if you're vaccinated.
And this builds on the Premier of New Brunswick's Policy 713, brought in last year, which requires parental notification on all issues related to gender identity, sexual orientation, and sex ed. So if a student under the age of 16 decides to swap genders in New Brunswick, parents are going to know. There aren't any secrets from parents in New Brunswick. Now, about the controversial sex ed presentation that prompted this change in policy around third-party presentations. It was so inappropriate that just one slide shown to the Premier was enough to change the policies. So I wanted to see this thing for myself. I did what I do and I filed for access to information into the New Brunswick Education Ministry just days after the controversy broke for a copy of that sex ed presentation. I do this work through your generous crowdfunded donations to a special website, rebelinvestigates.com. I mean, why shouldn't I have access to this presentation? Somebody saw fit to show it to 13 and 14-year-olds. Surely this fully formed adult woman before you, the mother of 3, should be able to gaze upon this very important slideshow, if you believe the activists, and judge it on its own educational merit, right? Except the third party which produced the slideshow refuses to release it. And they've even filed a complaint against my access to information request. The unmitigated gall of this group. Let me show you. Here's a letter I got back from the provincial ombud in New Brunswick. I'll give you a short history of what happened. I filed for the documents, which I should have gotten right off the bat. I mean, they're showing this stuff to kids. Why can't I see it? The information office told HPV Global Action that I was seeking the documents. It's a professional courtesy because the government agency determined that I should be able to see the records. However, HPV Global Action has filed a complaint to stop the presentation's release. Let's go through the letter together. Regarding third-party complaint under the Right to Information and Protection of Privacy Act, third party, HPV Global Action. This letter serves to notify you that our office has received a complaint from the aforementioned third party in relation to your access request that you originally submitted to the Department of Education on May 27th, 2024, which was in part transferred to Horizon Health Network. Now, that date is important because as soon as the story broke, we wanted to know what all the fuss was about. We wanted to see the presentation the way curious journalists would want to see. Let's keep going. During the process of your access request, Horizon Health Network noticed that the records relevant to your request consisted of third-party business or personal information, and therefore, as per their obligation under the Act, Horizon Health Network notified the third party to see whether it had any objections to the disclosure of their business or personal information. While the third party raised objections to the disclosure of its information, Horizon Health Network nevertheless had to decide on its disclosure based on the rules of the Act. And in this case, it decided that certain information of this third party should be disclosed. So they ruled in our favor, and that the information in this case, of course, being the slideshow, be turned over to us. As a result, Horizon Health Network so advised the third party, and subsequently, the third party filed this complaint with our office for us to determine whether any of their information can remain protected from disclosure. Please note that the release of records containing this third party's information is now on hold until our office has rendered a decision on whether you are entitled to receive access to the third party information. However, if your request contains other information that is not related to this third party, Horizon Health Network has been directed to continue processing the remainder of the request as per the rules of the Act. The deadline for our office to complete our investigation is February 3rd, 2025. So there you have it. HPV Global Action is blocking adults from seeing the presentation that they showed to other people's children behind their parents' backs in New Brunswick classrooms. We're going to fight this. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Exposure is the way to inoculate against the pernicious infestation of gender ideology in our children's classrooms. People must be able to see, to believe what these activists are doing and saying. People have to know how bad it really is. And frankly, the fact that HPV Global Action is blocking the release of these records, I think they are admitting just how grotesque and inappropriate what they're doing really is. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. If you'd like to help me get access to these records that HPV Global Action is blocking the release of, please consider making a donation at rebelinvestigates.com.